We have two brands. NeoGrid is the brand we use in South America. This case is a company in Brazil. And we have another brand, which is Agentrix, same operation. It's a brand that we use in the US, Asia, and Europe. Okay. I also have here Ricardo Gonçalves, who was responsible for selling this project. You know how important selling is. And Davi Abuab, who was very much involved in the implementation and is the one responsible for this presentation as well. So thank you very much. And they, of course, going to help me answer questions that you might have. Okay? So what we're going to be talking here is, you know, a dilemma that we always been exposed to, you know. You know, especially the ones that have been involved with TOC for a long time, know that the forecast word sometimes doesn't sound as good as we wanted, okay? So we always had this kind of dilemma on how to apply dynamic buffer management in an environment that we have a high variation of demand, which usually is the situation where we would apply demand planning or forecasting. So we still working on this project. I'm going to show you the phases, but we've been through the pilot successfully. And you're going to see that the pilot, you know, once again looking at the TOC rules, it's representative of the norm in the company. Okay, so it is a successful project. We deliver good results. And we like to say that the best result we got was that our internal sponsor was promoted. So we can tell that, you know, this is a successful project because we not only delivered value to the company, but we put the person, you know, going back to the concepts again, the green curve, red curve, we put the person in sustainable growth in the company. So what is this company about? It's one of the largest cosmetics franchise chain in the world. I don't have the authorization to say the name, but you can always Google and you're going to find out. So, introduction to the company. So, one of the largest cosmetics franchise chain in the world. So, they have a distribution model that they don't have, they distribute their products through franchises. So, you can enroll and have the right for a region, and you can open shops, okay? They have shops that they're their own franchises, okay? But for the most case, it's the largest franchise company in Brazil and one of the largest in the world as well, okay? And it's actually an international case when it comes to franchise models, okay? So it's a franchise chain. They have about 1,700 direct employees. So those are not the employees that work for the shops or franchise. They have about 600 beauty products, okay? Just to have an idea what type of products they have, they compete against companies like Avon or, you know, usually mid to top type of products, okay? They have about 900 retailers. Those are the franchisees, okay? And they have about 3,000 plus stores, okay? Most of the stores in Brazil, but they do have presence in 10 countries, and they have about 1,000 international points of sales, okay? In terms of revenue, it's a $2.5 billion company, okay? So it's a decent size company. Sorry to say decent, it's a very nice company, you know? Very big revenue, okay? So what's their structure? They have one manufacturing plant, just one manufacturing plant. As usually they say in cosmetic companies, they don't make cosmetics, you know. They make packaging because this is the most expensive part of their production and it's the most critical part of their production. So they have one manufacturing plant. They have one manufacturer DC, which is about 135 miles away from the plant. They're located in south of Brazil, okay? and the biggest consumer market, and I'm almost saying the name of the company now. So you know the hints now: Brazilian, franchise, cosmetics, South. You're gonna get there. The largest consumption market for any product in Brazil is São Paulo, which is southeast of Brazil. Okay. So, and from this distribution center, they serve the 3,000 stores they have. Okay. No regional distribution centers. Okay. No regional distribution centers. Okay. So here you can have an idea of, looking at the size of the company, $2.5 billion revenue, 3,000 stores, having just one distribution center. You can see the challenge in terms of getting the products at the right place, right time, and so on. Okay, so great deal of aggregation here, right? So one thing that plays, it's always a question that's raised, what about the frequency of delivery? This company, they have weekly deliveries to almost every store, okay? So the question, we all know, the next question is what's the mix? What's the delivery, the order lead time for each product? So some of their specificities. They have about 600 products, as I mentioned before, and they have about 200 new launches, okay? Those launches could be a brand new product or just, repackaging or some special kits, okay? Those special kits or even the repackaging could be related to campaigns, okay? Which is the next item. Demand is strong. I mean, they have, the items that people start getting used, and they have like a day-by-day use. But a lot of the products, sales are driven by campaigns. Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, Christmas, and so on. And part of the products they launch is, of course, related to those campaigns. Valentine's Day kit, for instance, where you have shampoo, perfume, a cream, something like this. Okay, and some campaigns can increase the demand in 1,000% in a single month. So there is a peak demand. Okay, so this is where the problems start coming in terms of looking, how do I deal with that if I want to implement a demand-driven type of scenario solution, okay, or in other words, a DBM here. So, don't need to say, but high demand variability environment here. There was also a lack of collaboration between the manufacturer and the franchisees or the stores, okay? So you had isolated actions on each end, okay? One being manufacturers would send promotions and launch the plan. So push situation. Here it is, Mother's Day campaign. Those are the products. This is what you have to have in stock, and, hope for the best, okay? On the other hand, franchisees would send orders, and we're going to see in a minute that not all the orders would be fulfilled. And we all know there is a side effect to this. But, so in one end, manufacturers are pushing for the campaigns. On the other end, the franchisees, ordering based on their experience, based on whatever they want to base on. But then they're not connected here, okay? All manufacturer analysis, they're done with sales data to franchisees. So in other words, there was not visibility on what we call the sell-through, what the end consumer is really buying. So the projections here at the manufacturing plant would be based on what they sold to the next link, which would be partially pushed because of the campaigns and partially pulled based on the store experience. Okay, but with no visibility to the end consumption. Okay, so what we have here is a limited supply chain visibility. We don't see the last link, and as we know, until the end consumer buys, nobody sold, right? So if you don't have the visibility, you're definitely doing things based on experience, past data, and we know that there's a lot of room for mistakes there. So far, so good? Any questions? Okay. Hope I keep you awake. You know, it's the 4th day. I know everybody's tired. So what are the UDs we have or we had in this project? Percentage of completed orders to franchise below wanted. The consequence is out of stock, but there's another consequence here. So if I'm ordering something, I don't get everything, so I might run out of stock. So what am I going to do next time? I'm going to order more. So I'm going to do my own math. You know, usually 20% doesn't come, so next time 120%. So guess what? Next time it comes 120%. So you have excessive inventory. So the side effect of not having everything that you want is definitely you're going to order more. And if you end up getting more, you have excessive inventory. Okay? I think you all know that, right? So no news here, but just to give you the context. So side effect, inventory coverage too high. You know, and of course, when we go in, it's usually the same game. You know, high runners, high profit, out of stock. The ones that we don't sell, they're there somewhere. We can find them, but nobody wants to buy anyways. Okay. And we had event planning difficulty. Large number of promotion and campaigns, and in the previous slide we showed there was lack of collaboration. So if you're trying to plan a campaign, but you're not collaborating with the other party, you know, what's going to happen? You know, they have just to, you know, swallow that and try to do their best. So there was a lack of collaboration there and a big number of campaigns. So their life was not exactly easy, okay? I have to say that this company is the most wanted franchise in Brazil. This is the most wanted franchise in Brazil because the shops are profitable, but we showed that they can be a lot more profitable. Shops are profitable. The brand is well recognized in Brazil, and you know, just to give you some demographics, Brazil it's a big country, not only in area, but our population now it's about 200 million people, and the economy is going well, so the consumption is going up. So it's a very big market. Okay, so sales are going up regardless. But we showed that we could improve a lot in this case as well. So what's the dilemma here? Of course, everybody wants to manage their inventory in a good way. Okay, so the arrows are actually the wrong way here. So we all know that we should replenish according to consumption, okay? And I'm reading backwards here, but anyways. So we should not use demand planning. We should not forecast. We should try to replenish based on actual consumption, okay? This is what we learn, correct? On TOC, yes. But also we understand that sometimes we need to push inventory to react to variation, okay? And we're actually causing variations through campaigns, okay? So we want to use demand planning on top of DBM, but this is conflicting. How do we make things work, okay? So there is definitely a conflict here. So let's exploit this a little bit. So when we look purely at dynamic buffer management, okay, we know that one of the key assumptions here is that demand variation should not be very high because we cannot react to extreme demand variation, okay? Of course, the goal here, and in any algorithm or replenishment mode we're going to engage in, we want to improve inventory turns and availability, okay? So what's the advantage of using DBM? We consider actual consumption in the process, okay? and we can react fast to the events as long as we have the delivery capability in place. Okay? What are the UD we can see in this process? We cannot manage in a good way the variation, high variations, as we just mentioned. Okay? Everybody agrees? That's the common understanding of dynamic buffer management? Hello? I learned that with some guy, you know. I should say, is that clear, yes or no? And then, you know, don't even look at you if you're answering. So, now, when we look at demand planning, what's the assumption? The assumption is there is some kind of pattern, okay, that will repeat itself over and over. Okay, so basically we're betting that whatever happened in the past will happen again. Okay, so that is the assumption, and so it's a prediction mode, it's a forecasting mode. Okay, so again, the goal is always to improve availability, to increase sales at the end of the day with the best margin we can. Okay, so what's the advantage of this replenishment algorithm or this technique? You know, we can consider future events and historical behavior, okay, in the process. And what is the undesirable effect we have out of this type of replenishment or forecasting here? Sorry, something is moving here. It doesn't take the action consumption in consideration when we're doing the calculations. Okay, so forecasting is looking at past data and future events, but it's not looking at the short-term consumption that we have at the store level to the end consumer, which is a very valuable information. Okay, so we go back to our conflict. So what's the solution we found here? What we start doing there, and this is the whole idea we sold to the company, and then we developed the approach to implement that, is to use demand planning on top of DBM. Okay? So some people are looking, how do you do that? You know, so it's a hybrid model. So we use forecasting plus the demand buffer management. So the assumption is demand behavior varies considering the campaigns we have, the promotions we have. Okay, but we still have a demand that's stable throughout the year. You know, for those customers that always come to buy, you know, products that they use in their day-by-day life. Okay, whatever it is. So it's a combination of two factors. So the main benefit is we can, of course, use the actual consumption information for those products that are varying slightly throughout the weeks because they're, you know, they're pretty steady type of consumption. And we use the forecast on top of that for the campaigns. But now you have to remember that some products, they also, even the ones that have steady consumption, they get into promotions as well. So they will have peak demands. Okay? So we have to combine the two techniques for the same SKUs. Okay? So what is the disadvantage that we saw in the beginning? It's confusing for people. Okay, how do I gonna use the two techniques at the same time on the same SKU for the same store? Okay, in other words, for the same SKU location. Okay, so there is some explanation to be given here. So what we would do then, this is a situation that we would push inventory. This would be based on forecasting. Okay. And of course, we would have the DBM adjustment down as we go through the campaign. Okay, on the red line, or you know, safety inventory, or however you want to call this, or you know, the buffer. The adjustment can also vary with the yellow and green line depending on the length of the campaign. If the length of the campaign is longer than the replenishment period, you would also adjust the buffer, or the safety line. Okay? If the campaign is shorter than the replenishment period, you would not adjust it. Otherwise, the consequence would be you would replenish too high and you would have excessive inventory. Okay? Does that make sense? Yes or no? Okay. So, the project. We started with a pilot, and we wanted to use, as I mentioned before, and this is also the TOC rule, if you do a pilot, it has to be representative of reality. Okay? Don't try to do a pilot that will never be replicated. So what we try to do, we try to get the 2 largest franchisees because they're representative of reality. Okay? So we use from one franchisee 26 stores. They have a total of 73 stores altogether, this specific franchisee. The other one, we took 36 stores out of 75 they have. Okay? Where are they located in Brazil?
The south part in the northeast.
Okay.
One is the south and the other is the northeast.
Okay, so one is in the south and the other one is in the northeast. That's probably 3,000 miles apart. That's also representative of reality. Okay? Because one, it's much closer to the distribution center, and the other one is really far from the distribution center. So we're putting more variables into the pilot here, okay, which is the transportation lead time or the replenishment lead time here. So we involved all products. Once again, we're trying to be representative of reality. We didn't want to just select, problems here and there. And one hint is, when you're trying to sell a project to a company like this, usually they say, well, let's get the worst case scenario, to do the pilot. That equals to failure, usually, because the situation that it's either too complex, even if it can be solved, it takes longer, those pilots that last for too long, or they cannot be replicated because they're not representative of reality. The norm is something else, not the worst case scenario. Okay? But we included all the products, even the ones that were launched during the pilot. So we wanted to have like a normal day in their operation life in the project. Okay? So what's the scope of the project? So we would have collaborative demand planning. Remember, before there was no collaboration. We would have actions from the stores, basically the store manager saying what they wanted, and actions from the manufacturing saying, hey, this is the promotion, this is what you're going to have, those are the products, and that's it. They would not talk. Okay? It was almost like 2 different operations with 2 different goals. Okay? So we implemented collaborative demand planning, which basically is you have to agree on what is the demand projections. Both ends, they have to come in, put their opinion, and agree on what the demand is. And we use DBM and weekly collaborative replenishment at stores. Okay? So once again, the collaborative demand planning would deal especially with the promotions, okay, the campaigns. And the DBM would deal with the normal day-by-day life type of product. But some of those products, they could be included in campaigns as well. Okay? So back again, it's 600 products. So it's a pretty good mix. So the project timelines, we had 3 months of preparation, 3 months of pilot go live. Okay? So, and if we go back, we're talking about, oops. Here we're talking about, 26 stores from the first franchisee and 36 from the second one. So it's a good number of stores. So we had a decision point based on results. Okay, and we're going to talk about what the results were and what are the goals we reached. And then the rollout, which was automatic process going forward. So what are the goals? First thing is we agreed with the client prior to the beginning of the project. You know, the obvious must be said. You know, you have to agree what the goal is before you start working. Okay? It looks obvious, doesn't it? But, you know, if you don't really make it clear, it changes. It's a moving target, you know, and it's hard to hit moving targets. Okay? And they were set after we do research and compare benchmarks. Okay? So what kind of goals? And this was, you know, with a great involvement from the customer. It was not something that we would just give it to them and say, do you accept or not? You know, collaboration is key in the sales process, in the scope definition, and in the implementation. Okay? So, and it was a necessary condition for the rollout. So we needed to reach those numbers in order to go past the pilot and, of course, do the rollout. And probably the most important, it was introduced as company KPIs. You know, then we go back to one of the other lessons we have. You know, tell me how you measure and tell how you behave, right? So as we introduce this as company KPIs, everybody's working for that. Okay, so very simple, right? But very relevant items here. Agree with them, define with them, make sure there's no extra conditions for the rollout. You know, in other words, don't come to me and say, hey, I need something else now for the rollout. Okay, and it has to be the measurement for everybody involved in the project. In this case, the whole company was measured by that. Okay. You just did one. Yes, go ahead.
What particular KPIs? Can you just...
Yeah, sure, yeah. Yeah, right there, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I knew you'd ask that, yeah. So, inventory turns and stock outs, okay? Because, you know, when we're talking about supply chain, this is the end game, right? Inventory turn and stock out. Of course, first layer of measurements. Later on, we want to go into margin, which will impact in product mix and so on. Yeah. So inventory turns. We needed to increase inventory turns by 20%. Okay. Again, there's a context here that's very important. This is the most wanted franchise in Brazil. Not just because they're beautiful or they sell nice products, but because they sell a lot. The economy is growing fast in Brazil, you know. If you want to come to a company in Brazil and tell them that, you know, you're going to increase their sales in 15%, they're going to say, thank you, we're going to increase in 25% anyways. Because the economy is growing fast, okay? So, you're going to a very efficient, you know, at everybody's eyes, you're going to a very efficient type of company because they're selling, they're growing, everybody wants to open more shops. It is profitable, okay? So it seems like there are no problems, okay? So inventory turns we wanted to increase in 20%, and stock outs we want to reduce in 30%. So the project. We would have then the manufacturers looking at the store, and we would plan event in a collaborative way. Remember, before, you know, it would be like a lab type of work, you know. I would do research as, you know, the guy in the manufacturing. Well, this is the right mix. This is what I need to do. I would just push it out, okay? Why would I want to involve the stores? There are 3,000, too complex, okay? But then we start involving the stores. And then we would collect their inputs. Guess what? They're the guys who are facing the customers, you know. Although we own I'm talking as a manufacturer. We own the brand. We develop the products. We're a successful company. But they're facing the customers, and they have valuable inputs for that, okay? So we would, and this is all based on technology. We do provide the technology that we can suggest what the campaign is, we can collect information back, and we can have a consensus on that, which you're going to show now. So then we would come to a consensus, and this is all driven by technology and a process. It's not something that's standing out there and, you know, hey, when you have a time, can you have a look at this? No. I mean, we have dates and times that you have to get your input in. If your input's not there, it's not going to be considered. As tough as that, okay? So we would get to a consensus, and then we would plan the pushes, okay? But the pushes would be different than before, because before we would just push big lots, you know. Whatever I think you would sell, I would just push. Okay, so if I think you're going to sell 1,000, here it is. Now, if I think you're going to sell 1,000, you know, I would hold part of it back in our distribution warehouse. So as I have a weekly frequency in average, okay, I could quickly react to any variation, even in the campaign, okay? So we define the push by forecasting, but we manage the campaign with DBM. Is this clear? So we would agree, we would have a consensus on what the promotion should be and the stock push would be, okay? Then the collaborative replenishment process would be, we would suggest orders. And that's something, you know, sometimes in the literature or in the theory, we don't come to an agreement. You know, should we suggest or should just do the calculation and trust the algorithm? Okay? But this was more company philosophy than necessarily algorithm. So they would suggest orders, and we would get sales and inventory data. Okay? So we would know what was happening real time. I mean, this is daily information. Okay, not real time, but you know, the time span is good enough, one day. So collaborative demand planning. So we would then, for the promotions, we would have statistical forecasts based on historical data. Because, you know, we can look back and see, hey, how was the campaign last year during Mother's Day? Okay, use this information to try to plan. Because those events, they're not a day-by-day event. It's important to use some kind of previous experience, okay? So manufacturer plan is sent to franchise, and then the franchise would go through that, and then they would give the feedback. So basically what we're describing here is the process of interacting. Actually, it was the slide before. The process of interacting and getting back. What we're defining is basically this. We would plan and would get the feedback from the franchises. So then we would have a final consensus plan and use this for the DBM to adjust one campaign replenishment. And then from that moment on, we would adjust it down as necessary. So stock pushes at the SKU level, okay, is the result of this process. So we would define for each store, each SKU, what the push should be. So on the DBM, we would have weekly collaboration replenishment and weekly collaboration replenishment. So the store buffers would be adjusted based on actual consumption and also when any increase in stock push was planned. So let's say, once again, DBM is running. They would have a weekly. Again, it's a process. It's a tool. We would have a weekly meeting for consensus, and if there's any adjustment we would need, we would rebalance the buffers. Is this clear? Okay. So, as I mentioned before, we would suggest quantities. This was a company policy more than anything else. They don't want to push and just say, hey, we have a new system in place. This is it now. Okay? It might become the norm as we move on and they trust the system. Okay? So we also ask for the franchisees to help. Okay? And once again, we implement a collaboration process there. So the goal was to increase the inventory turns in 20%. In the pilot, we actually increased 60%. Okay? And the important thing, when we look at the number, we have always to go back and ask, is the pilot representative of reality? If it's not, don't celebrate. Okay? Don't celebrate. So some qualitative results. And that goes back to your question. By the end of the pilot, some stores were running on full automatic replenish mode. So even though we had, the weekly meetings, a lot of stores did just say, hey, I'm happy, let's move on. You're improving my sales. Okay? And the suggested quantities, or the calculation by the system, was smaller than the orders they're placing. Of course, because before they would order, they would not all the time get it. So there is a level of distrust, and you want to build your own safety inventory because the last thing you want to do as a store manager is go back to your boss and say, hey, I lost sales because I didn't order enough. Okay? Probably they would use different words. Well, they didn't send it to me. Okay? But it's the same thing at the end of the day. And of course, less time spent in operation work. So they could take care of, selling, going to the customer, making the experience a little bit better, Okay. Well, implementing a collaborative process also helps the change management, okay, to overcome resistance, okay. Even if it's the best solution in the world, if you don't get the buy-in, you're not going to get it implemented. You're going to get sabotaged almost at the end. So conclusion is we would have a single planning process throughout the supply chain, which is also very important because, before they would get management attention away because they would have different types of dealing with inventory of each, once again, 3,000 stores, and they would focus to sell more and sharing more information on event and their experience with end consumers. Okay, so talking about next steps, phase 1, 9% of the store revenue. This is what we want to get, and then phase 2, 50%, and then at the last phase, 67%. We're through the phase 1, right? And we're about 150 stores at this point. Okay? Still. Huh?
We have automatic approval.
Yeah, we're ready in the rollout process now. We've been through the pilot, delivered the results. We are in the rollout. We're just implementing more and more stores. Of course, there is a Pareto analysis here that you have to make. More stores. Don't contribute as much as the first stores. But anyways, we want to get to 67% of their revenue. And, just to give you some words about our company, again, as I mentioned in the beginning, we have 2 brands, Agentrix and NeoGrid. It's the same operation, same product, same portfolio. NeoGrid is the brand we use in South America, and Agentrix is the brand we use. Agentrix is actually based here in the U.S., in Virginia. We use in the U.S., Europe, and Asia. We have operations and customers in 34 countries. We operate today in 9 different languages, and we target large retailers. Those are most of our customers. Okay? Thank you very much.